The navigation computer on the human ship Endeavour made a terrible mistake. What should have been a simple jump to the next star system turned into something completely different. When the ship dropped out of hyperspace, Captain Sarah Chen found herself looking at the largest alien structures she had ever imagined. The star system was filled with massive metal rings that circled entire planets. Space stations the size of small moons hung in perfect formation. Ships longer than Earth's biggest cities moved between the structures like fish in an ocean. Everything was built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light. "Well, this is new," Captain Chen said calmly. She had been exploring space for 15 years and had seen many strange things, but nothing quite like this. Her crew of 200 people worked at their stations on the bridge. They ran scans and took pictures like they always did when they found something interesting. Dr. James Rodriguez, the ship's science officer, was already making excited notes about the alien technology. "Captain, we're getting massive energy readings from those structures," reported Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. "Whatever built this has technology far beyond ours." "Any signs of life?" Chen asked. "Thousands of ships, ma'am, and something big is heading our way." Through the main viewing screen, they watched a ship approach that made their own vessel look like a toy. It was shaped like a giant blade, dark and threatening. Smaller ships flew around it like angry insects. The alien vessel was easily 50 times larger than the Endeavour. "Should we run, Captain?" asked Commander Torres, her first officer. Chen thought about it for a moment. They were lost anyway, with no idea how to get home. Running would not solve their navigation problem. "No, let's see what they want. Maybe they can give us directions." The alien ship stopped in front of them. Lights flashed along its hull in patterns that seemed designed to look scary. Then a voice came through their communication system. It spoke in perfect English, though with a strange accent. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the territory of the Kethmori Galactic Empire. You will surrender immediately or face destruction. This is your only warning." Chen looked around the bridge. Her crew continued working calmly. This was not the first time they had met unfriendly people in space. Pirates, territorial governments, and angry colonists were nothing new. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Endeavour," she replied. "We seem to have gotten lost. We would appreciate the chance to speak with your government about our situation. Perhaps we can work something out." There was a long silence from the alien ship. Then the voice returned, sounding confused. "Did you not understand? We demand your immediate surrender. Resistance is futile." "I heard you the first time," Chen said politely, "but we're not really interested in surrendering to anyone today. Would it be possible to speak with someone in charge? We're happy to follow proper diplomatic procedures." On the bridge, Engineer Liu Wei looked up from her console. "Captain, their ship design is interesting. The power flow pattern suggests some major inefficiencies in their energy systems. I bet we could help them improve their fuel consumption by at least 20%. Dr. Rodriguez had pulled up the scans of the alien structures on his screen. "The construction techniques are impressive, but I'm seeing some stress patterns in the support beams that suggest they might have stability issues in the long term. Someone should probably look into that." The alien voice came back again, now sounding frustrated. You are not surrendering. Why are you not surrendering?" "Because we don't really see a reason to," Chen replied honestly. "Look, we're explorers, not conquerors. We got lost, we found you, and now we're hoping to figure out a way home. If you could point us toward the local government, we can probably sort this out like civilized people." Several smaller alien ships had surrounded the Endeavour. Their weapons were powered up and ready to fire. But instead of feeling scared, the human crew seemed more interested in taking measurements. "Captain, their weapon systems use a plasma-based design," reported Lieutenant Park. "It's actually quite clever. Reminds me of the defensive systems we saw during the Mars colony troubles a few years back." Chen nodded. The Mars situation had involved actual fighting with real casualties. This felt much more manageable by comparison. "Any chance they want to board our ship?" she asked the alien voice. "We'd be happy to meet face to face." Another long silence. Then, You want us to board your vessel?" "Sure, if that's part of your standard first contact procedures. We brought some coffee and earth food if your people are interested in cultural exchange. Dr. Rodriguez here has been looking forward to meeting new species for years." The doctor waved enthusiastically at the viewing screen, even though he knew the aliens could not see him. The alien ship stopped moving. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the big ship sent a message that was clearly not meant for human ears. The translation software picked up fragments. "Never seen anything like this, and they're not reacting properly. And what do we do now? Finally, the official voice returned. You will accompany us to our command ship. Any hostile action will result in immediate destruction. Understood, Chen replied. We'll follow you. Oh, and thank you for using our language. That's very considerate. As the alien ships led them toward the massive command vessel, Chen looked around at her crew. They were busy with their usual work, scanning, recording, and analyzing everything they saw. To them, this was just another day of exploration. They had dealt with hostile governments before. They had survived wars, natural disasters, and mechanical failures that would have destroyed most civilizations. Meeting some new aliens with big ships and threatening language was, honestly, not even in the top 10 most dangerous things that had happened to them this year. Captain, Commander Torres said quietly, do you think they're actually dangerous? Chen watched the alien ships moving in perfect formation around them. Maybe. But they seem more confused than hostile. I think they expected us to be scared. Are you scared? Torres asked. Chen considered the question seriously. She thought about the evacuation of Europa when the ice started cracking. She remembered the plague on New Beijing and the 3 months they had spent in quarantine. She recalled the asteroid, miners who had tried to take over their ship 2 years ago with weapons much more dangerous than anything these aliens had shown. No, she said finally. I'm curious. The Endeavour moved slowly toward the alien command ship, its crew working calmly and professionally despite being surrounded by potentially hostile forces. They had no idea that their casual response to the Kethmori Empire's standard intimidation tactics was already causing panic in the alien command structure. Behind them, the Kethmori officers were frantically trying to figure out what kind of species could look at their most terrifying weapons and respond with polite interest and engineering suggestions. It was not going according to their usual plan. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Kethmori Empire had encountered something they did not understand, and that something seemed completely unimpressed by everything they had built to inspire fear across the galaxy. The inside of the Kethmori command ship was designed to frighten people. Everything was made from black metal. The hallways were too narrow and the ceilings were too low. Strange lights flickered in patterns meant to make visitors feel nervous and small. The air smelled like chemicals and decay. Captain Chen and 5 of her officers walked through the corridors with their alien escorts. The Kethmori soldiers wore heavy armor that made them look like walking tanks. Their faces were hidden behind masks shaped like skull bones. They carried weapons that hummed with barely controlled energy. Interesting architecture, Dr. Rodriguez said, looking around with genuine interest. The lighting choices are very dramatic. Is this a traditional style for your people? The lead, Kethmori soldier, stopped walking for a moment, confused by the question. Then he continued without answering. Engineer Liu Wei examined the walls as they walked. Captain, look at these power conduits. They're running the energy flow through the decorative elements. It's actually quite creative, though not very efficient for maintenance. The soldiers led them into a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. The room was designed like an ancient throne room, but filled with alien technology. Holographic displays showed maps of the galaxy with thousands of worlds marked in red. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. At the center of the room sat the most important Kethmori they had seen yet. He was larger than the others, with more elaborate armor covered in symbols that probably meant something threatening. His chair was built from what looked like the bones of enormous creatures. I am War Leader Kethavan, the alien said in a voice designed to sound like death itself. You stand before the might of the Kethmori Empire. We have conquered 10,000 worlds. We have destroyed entire species who dared to resist us. Captain Chen nodded politely. Nice to meet you, War Leader. I'm Captain Sarah Chen. This is quite an impressive operation you have here. Kethavan continued his speech as if she had not interrupted. You will now witness the submission ceremony. You will learn why resistance is meaningless. You will understand the fate of all who oppose our will. The lights in the room dimmed to almost nothing. Strange music began playing. Sounds like breaking glass and dying animals mixed together. Holographic images appeared showing planets burning and cities falling. The displays were designed to show the complete hopelessness of fighting against the Empire. Dr. Rodriguez pulled out his tablet and started taking notes. Captain, this is fascinating. It's like a combination of political theater and psychological warfare. The use of sensory manipulation to create emotional responses is quite sophisticated. Commander Torres leaned over to look at the holographic displays. The special effects are impressive. Reminds me of those war documentaries we watched in school but with better technology. The ceremony continued for 20 minutes. Images of destruction played while Kethmori voices spoke about the futility of resistance. The temperature in the room dropped to make the humans feel cold and vulnerable. Hidden speakers created sounds designed to trigger fear responses in most species. When it was over, the lights came back up. War leader Kethvin leaned forward in his throne, waiting for the humans to collapse in terror and beg for mercy. This was how it always went. This was how it had gone for 1,000 years. Instead, Captain Chen started clapping. That was very well done. The coordination between the visual elements and the audio was excellent. Is this performed regularly, or just for special occasions? The other human officers joined in the applause. Dr. Rodriguez was still taking notes about the technical aspects of the presentation. Kethvin stared at them. The silence stretched on for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a voice much less confident than before. You are supposed to be afraid. Oh, should we be scared? Chen asked. I'm sorry, we didn't realize. It was quite impressive, don't get me wrong. But we've seen similar things before. Similar things? Kethvin's voice rose in pitch. Well, yes. Governments trying to intimidate their enemies is pretty common where we come from. The presentation style is different, but the basic idea is the same. Engineer Liu Wei raised her hand like a student in a classroom. Could I ask about the energy requirements for those holographic displays? The power consumption must be enormous. Have you considered using more efficient projection systems? War leader Kethvin looked around at his advisors. They looked back at him with expressions that might have been panic under their masks. This was not going according to their plan. You do not understand, Kethvin said, trying to regain control. We are the most feared power in this galaxy. We have weapons that can destroy stars. Our armies are without number. That's quite impressive, Chen agreed. What's your approximate military budget? And how do you handle logistics across such a large territory? The coordination challenges must be incredible. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from his notes. Could you tell us more about your history? How did your civilization develop these capabilities? The sociological implications are fascinating. For the first time in his life, war leader Kethvin found himself explaining his empire's history to aliens who treated galactic conquest like an interesting hobby. The humans asked practical questions about trade routes, resource management, and administrative structures. During our expansion into the Vega sector, Kethvin found himself saying, we encountered significant resistance from the local species. However, our superior firepower and strategic positioning allowed us to. Oh, that sounds like the Vega system had good defensive positions, Commander Torres interrupted. Natural choke points in the hyperspace routes? Yes, exactly. The asteroid fields created natural barriers that. Kethvin stopped talking. He realized he was having a casual conversation about military strategy, instead of conducting an intimidation ritual. The humans had somehow turned his submission ceremony into a friendly discussion about imperial management. This is wrong, he said, more to himself than to the humans. You should be begging for your lives. You should be offering us tribute and surrender. Captain Chen looked concerned. Are we doing something rude? We're still learning about your culture. If we've offended you somehow, please let us know. You are not. You are not responding correctly, Kethvin said weakly. How should we be responding? Dr. Rodriguez asked with genuine interest. We want to be respectful of your customs. War leader. Kethvin sat back in his throne made of bones and stared at the humans. They were looking at him expectantly, waiting for instructions on proper diplomatic behavior. They had watched his empire's most terrifying propaganda and treated it like an educational documentary. In the back of the room, junior officers whispered to each other in their own language. The humans' translation software picked up fragments of their conversation. Something is very wrong with these creatures, and they are not afraid of anything. And what kind of world produces beings like this? Perhaps, Captain Chen suggested, helpfully, we could discuss the practical arrangements for our stay. We don't want to be any trouble, but we do need to figure out how to get home. Also, do you have any dietary restrictions we should know about? We brought some of our food to share, and I'd hate for anyone to have an allergic reaction. War leader Kethvin put his head in his hands. In 1,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever offered to share their lunch with the Kethmori Empire. He was beginning to suspect that these humans might be the most dangerous creatures he had ever encountered, but not for any reason he could understand. News of the strange humans spread through the Kethmori communication networks like wildfire. Every ship captain, every station commander, and every planetary governor heard the same impossible story. The new species had looked at the Empire's most terrifying weapons and asked about fuel efficiency. They had watched the submission ceremony and applauded like it was entertainment. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, a group of enslaved Zephyrians gathered around their hidden communication device. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species that had been conquered 50 years earlier. They worked in the deep mines, extracting rare metals for the Empire's war machine. "Is it true?" whispered Zephyra, the unofficial leader of the resistance cell. "Are there really beings who are not afraid of the Kethmori?" The message from the human ship had been broadcast on open channels. Captain Chen's calm voice asking for diplomatic meetings had been heard across dozens of star systems. "We're explorers, not conquerors," she had said. "We got lost, we found you, and now we're hoping to figure out a way home." They spoke to war leader Kethvin like he was a minor government official, said another Zephyrian. They treated the Empire like it was just another civilization to trade with. Similar conversations were happening on conquered worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had been broken by decades of Kethmori rule were hearing something they had not heard in generations. The sound of someone speaking to their oppressors as equals. Meanwhile, the humans had been given temporary quarters on the space station orbiting the Kethmori homeworld. Instead of staying locked in their rooms like proper prisoners, they had asked for permission to establish a small research facility. War leader Kethvin had agreed, mostly because he was too confused, to say no. Dr. Rodriguez set up his laboratory in a section of the station that the Kethmori used for storing broken equipment. Within days, he had repaired most of the machinery and improved its efficiency by 40%. He worked alongside Kethmori technicians, sharing human scientific knowledge freely. "Your electromagnetic field generators could work much better. With a few small adjustments," he explained to a group of alien engineers. "We had similar problems on Earth until we figured out the proper harmonic frequencies." The Kethmori engineers listened carefully. They had never met anyone willing to help them improve their technology. Usually, conquered species tried to hide their knowledge or use it as a bargaining tool. Engineer Liu Wei had convinced the station commander to let her examine their power systems. She spent her days crawling through maintenance tunnels, making diagrams and suggestions. "You're losing about 30% of your energy output to heat waste," she told the chief engineer. "If you reroute the plasma flow through these secondary channels, you can capture that waste heat and use it for life support systems." Within a week, the space station was running more efficiently than it had in years. The Kethmori crew found themselves actually enjoying their work for the first time in decades. Captain Chen had requested meetings with representatives from other species in the Empire. She wanted to understand the local political situation before making any long-term plans. The meetings were supposed to be formal diplomatic sessions, but they quickly turned into something else. "Your people have been enslaved for 50 years? Chen asked the Zephyrian ambassador. "That must be very difficult. How do you maintain your cultural identity under those conditions?" The ambassador, a gentle creature with blue-scaled skin, started crying. It had been decades since anyone had asked about Zephyrian culture. We try to teach our children the old songs in secret, but many of the younger generation do not remember what life was like before." "Would you like help preserving your cultural records?" Chen offered. "We have experience with historical preservation. On Earth, we've had to rebuild entire civilizations after wars and disasters." Word of these conversations spread through the underground networks that connected all the Empire's conquered worlds. The humans were not just unafraid of the Kethmori, they were actively helping their victims. The breaking point came when the Empire decided to demonstrate their power to the humans. War leader Kethvin chose a planet that had recently rebelled against Imperial rule. The world of Tau Ceti Prime had refused to pay their tribute taxes and had declared independence. Kethvin invited Captain Chen to watch from the bridge of his flagship as they destroyed the planet's major cities. The bombardment was designed to be overwhelming, enough destruction to break the will of any species watching. The Kethmori weapons lit up the night sky of Tau Ceti Prime. Cities burned. Millions of beings died in the first few minutes. It was the kind of casual genocide that had kept the Empire's subjects in line for centuries. Captain Chen watched the destruction through the bridge's main screen. Her face showed no emotion. She made notes on her tablet and occasionally asked technical questions about the weapon systems. "Captain," Commander Torres said quietly, "the estimated civilian casualties are over 3 million in the first wave." "I see that," Chen replied, calmly. "War leader, do you have disaster relief protocols in place? The survivors will need medical assistance, food supplies, and temporary shelter. Kethvin stared at her. Disaster relief? We just destroyed their cities. There is no relief. Oh. Chen looked genuinely confused. You're just going to leave them to die? That seems inefficient. Dead populations can't pay taxes or provide labor. The destruction is the point, Kethvin explained. Other worlds see what happens to rebels. Fear keeps them in line. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I understand the strategy. We used similar approaches on Earth during our less civilized periods. Though we found that reconstruction programs after conflicts usually provided better long-term stability. She turned to her officers. Torres, can we organize relief efforts? Rodriguez, what supplies do we have that might help with immediate medical needs? Within hours, the human ship was coordinating with surviving government officials on Tau Ceti Prime. They provided medical supplies, engineering expertise, and organizational assistance. They treated the Imperial bombardment like a natural disaster that required humanitarian response. The other species in the Empire watched in amazement. Someone had witnessed the Kethmori's ultimate demonstration of power and responded by organizing charity drives. On the bridge of the flagship, war leader Kethvin sat alone, staring out at the damaged planet below. His advisors had all found reasons to be elsewhere. The humans' matter-of-fact response to mass murder had shaken something fundamental in the Imperial command structure. Sir? A junior officer approached carefully. The humans are requesting permission to establish refugee camps on the planet's surface. They want to begin rebuilding the water purification systems. Kethvin said nothing for a long time. Finally, what kind of species looks at a planet-killing demonstration and starts planning disaster relief? I don't know, sir, but their preliminary casualty reduction efforts have already saved approximately 50,000 lives. Kethvin closed his eyes. For 1,000 years, the Empire had maintained control through fear. They were the most terrible thing in the galaxy. They were the darkness that made other species hide in their homes and surrender without fighting. But these humans had seen their worst atrocity and responded with first aid kits and engineering advice. What kind of world, Kethvin wondered, produces beings who treat genocide like a minor setback requiring proper disaster management? He was terrified to find out. War leader Kethvin could not sleep. He spent his nights reading the human databases that Dr. Rodriguez had shared freely as part of their cultural exchange program. What he found there made him question everything he thought he knew about civilized behavior. The humans called their current era the modern period and considered it a time of relative peace and prosperity. Yet their historical records showed conflicts that made the Kethmori Empire's worst atrocities look restrained. 2 world wars, Kethvin muttered to himself, reading the files in his private quarters. They fought 2 wars that involved their entire planet in just 1 century. He scrolled through the casualty numbers. 60 million dead in their Second World War alone. Entire cities destroyed by single weapons. Civilians targeted deliberately as military strategy. Industrial-scale murder programs designed to eliminate entire populations. And this was them fighting each other, he whispered. Not conquering alien species, their own kind. The files contained detailed descriptions of human military tactics. Chemical weapons that dissolved human lungs. Biological weapons designed to spread disease through entire populations. Nuclear weapons that could destroy cities in seconds and leave the land poisoned for generations. But the thing that truly frightened Kethvin was how the humans wrote about these events. The historical records were calm and analytical. They studied their own atrocities like scientific phenomena. They built museums to remember them. They taught their children about them in schools. They learn from their mistakes, he realized. They document everything so they can do better next time. Kethvin found records of something called the Holocaust, a systematic program to murder millions of people based on their ethnicity and beliefs. The humans had not only documented every detail of this atrocity, but had created international laws to prevent it from happening again. They make rules to limit their own behavior, he said aloud, because they know what they are capable of. The environmental records were equally disturbing. The humans had nearly destroyed their own planet through pollution and resource depletion. They had caused mass extinction events that wiped out thousands of species. They had changed their planet's climate and poisoned their own air and water. But they fixed it, Kethvin noted, reading about their environmental recovery programs. They nearly killed their world, then brought it back from the brink. A message arrived on his personal communication system. It was from Admiral Vex Thule, the Empire's most feared military commander. The Admiral wanted to meet with the human captain personally. Admiral Vex Thule had built his reputation on psychological warfare. He was known throughout the galaxy for his ability to break the spirit of enemy leaders through interrogation and intimidation. Species that had resisted the Empire for decades would surrender after a single meeting with the Admiral. He had requested a private meeting with Captain Chen. Cathavin approved the meeting, hoping that the Admiral's legendary skills would finally make the humans understand their position. The meeting took place in the Admiral's personal interrogation chamber. The room was designed to create maximum psychological pressure. The lighting was harsh and direct. The temperature was uncomfortably cold. The walls were covered with instruments that were designed to look like torture devices. Admiral Vexthul was a massive Kethmori, even larger than war leader Cathavin. His armor was black with red markings that indicated his kills. His voice was artificially modified to sound like grinding metal. "Captain Chen," he began in his most intimidating tone, "you and your crew are now prisoners of the Kethmori Empire. You will answer my questions completely and honestly, or you will suffer pain beyond your imagination." Captain Chen sat calmly, in the metal chair across from him. She looked around the room with mild interest. "This is quite a setup you have here, Admiral. Are those actual historical torture devices or modern reproductions designed for psychological effect?" The Admiral paused. No prisoner had ever asked about his decorating choices before. "They are functional instruments." "Interesting. We have similar items in our museums on Earth, though most of our historical torture devices are much more primitive than these. Your technology allows for more precision." Admiral Vexthul leaned forward. "You do not seem to understand your situation, Captain. I have broken the will of every species in this galaxy. I will describe to you exactly what I will do to each member of your crew unless you cooperate." For the next 10 minutes, the Admiral provided graphic descriptions of various torture techniques. He explained how he would extract information from her officers through pain and psychological pressure. He described methods of interrogation that had worked on every species he had ever encountered. Captain Chen listened politely, occasionally nodding or asking for clarification about technical details. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Those are certainly thorough methods," she said finally. "Though I should point out that torture is generally not very effective for gathering accurate information. Studies on Earth show that subjects under extreme duress tend to say whatever they think their interrogators want to hear, regardless of whether it's true." She pulled out her tablet and showed him some files. "If you're genuinely interested in improved interrogation techniques, you might want to review the Geneva Conventions and the UN Guidelines on Prisoner Treatment. We've found that psychological manipulation combined with social isolation tends to be more effective than physical torture." Admiral Vexthul stared at the tablet screen. The human was showing him more efficient ways to extract information from prisoners. She was giving him professional advice on how to improve his interrogation techniques. "Of course," Chen continued, "the most effective approach is usually just asking nicely and offering some kind of mutual benefit. Most people are happy to share information if they understand how it helps them too." The Admiral's hands began to shake. In 50 years of psychological warfare, no prisoner had ever critiqued his methods and suggested improvements. You are trying to help me torture people more effectively." "Only if you're determined to use torture at all," Chen said reasonably. "Though honestly, Admiral, based on what I've seen of your civilization, you might get better results with economic incentives and social programs. Fear-based control systems tend to be unstable in the long term." Admiral Vexthul stood up abruptly and walked to the far side of the room. He leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "What is wrong with your species?" he asked quietly. "What do you mean?" Chen seemed genuinely confused. "You look at our weapons and suggest improvements. You watch us destroy planets and organize disaster relief. You listen to descriptions of torture and offer professional advice. What kind of creatures are you?" Captain Chen considered the question seriously. "We're survivors, I suppose. Our species has been through some very difficult times. We've learned to adapt to almost any situation." "What kind of difficult times?" Chen accessed her tablet again. "Well, let's see. In the last century alone, we've had 2 global wars, multiple nuclear weapons exchanges, several plague outbreaks, massive environmental collapses, resource wars, civil conflicts, natural disasters, and a few asteroid impacts." She scrolled through the data. "Oh, and we spent about 40 years convinced we were going to destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons. That was a tense period." "But you survived all of that?" "Obviously, or we wouldn't be here talking to you." Chen smiled. "Humans are remarkably good at surviving terrible situations. It's probably our most distinctive trait as a species." Admiral Vexthul slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. We are not the most terrible thing you have ever encountered. Oh no, not even close, Chen said cheerfully. You're certainly more advanced than most of our historical threats, but in terms of raw destructive potential, you're maybe a 6 out of 10, 7 at most. The Admiral put his head in his hands. I need to leave now. Are you feeling all right? Admiral, you look a bit pale. Admiral Vexthul left the room without another word. He was later found in his personal quarters, staring at the wall and muttering about creatures from hell disguised as polite explorers. Captain Chen remained in the interrogation room, reading through her tablet and making notes about Kethmori, psychology. She was genuinely trying to understand their culture, so she could be more helpful in future diplomatic interactions. She had no idea that she had just caused the psychological collapse of the Empire's most feared military commander. The Kethmori Empire collapsed on a Tuesday. It did not fall to military conquest or economic pressure or political revolution. It simply stopped functioning when its leadership realized they were not the most frightening thing in the galaxy. War leader Kethvin spent 3 days reading human historical records, then submitted his resignation and requested political asylum on Earth. Admiral Vexthul had suffered what human psychologists diagnosed as a severe anxiety disorder and was receiving therapy from Dr. Rodriguez. Half the Imperial High Command had requested transfers to less stressful positions. The remaining Kethmori government officials found themselves in the strange position of trying to manage an empire while their entire command structure was having nervous breakdowns. We need to discuss transition procedures, Captain Chen said, during an emergency meeting with the surviving Imperial leadership. If you're planning to abandon your current governmental system, we should probably establish some kind of interim authority to prevent chaos. Fleet Commander Kethmol, now the highest-ranking Kethmori who was still psychologically functional, looked around the conference room helplessly. We do not know how to govern without fear. For 1,000 years our power came from being the most terrible force in the galaxy. Well, you're clearly not the most terrible force in the galaxy, Chen said practically. So you'll need a new approach. What other strengths does your civilization have? We are very good at building things, Kethmol said hesitantly. Our engineering and construction capabilities are quite advanced. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from his notes. That's excellent. Infrastructure development is always in high demand. Instead of building weapons to threaten people, you could build cities, space stations, and transportation systems to help them. But how would that give us power over other species? Why do you need power over other species? Chen asked. Wouldn't it be more efficient to trade with them as equals? The concept of voluntary cooperation was so foreign to Kethmori, thinking that Fleet Commander Kethmol had to lie down for several minutes to process it. Meanwhile, the conquered species throughout the Empire were organizing their own response to the changing situation. The humans had shared detailed information about democratic governments, economic cooperation, and international law. The Zephyrians on Kepler 442b had declared independence and established a provisional government based on human constitutional models. The Altarian Federation had reformed their pre-conquest trade agreements. The Centauri Republic had reopened their universities and started teaching courses on human philosophy and political science. Captain, Commander Torres reported, we're receiving requests for assistance from 47 different species. They want help establishing new governments, rebuilding their economies, and creating defense agreements. Captain Chen rubbed her temples. This is getting complicated. We're explorers, not nation builders. Perhaps we could establish some kind of cooperative council, Dr. Rodriguez suggested. A voluntary association where species can work together on common problems, like the United Nations back on Earth. Similar concept, but hopefully more effective. Within 6 months, the Galactic Cooperation Council had been established with representatives from over 200 species. The humans had reluctantly accepted the position of first mediators, mainly because they were the only species that could negotiate with former Kethmori leadership without causing panic attacks. The Council's headquarters were built on a neutral space station constructed jointly by human and Kethmori engineers. The design was efficient, peaceful, and completely unlike anything the Empire had ever created. The first session of the Galactic Cooperation Council is now in order, Captain Chen announced from the podium. She had been elected as the first human representative, despite her repeated protests that she was not qualified for politics. The assembled delegates represented species from across the former empire. Former slaves sat next to their former oppressors. Ancient enemies worked together on trade agreements. Species that had been at war for centuries were collaborating on scientific research projects. Fleet Commander Kethmol, representing the reformed Kethmori Republic, raised his hand. The Kethmori delegation would like to formally apologize for our previous actions. We are prepared to make reparations and assist with reconstruction efforts. Thank you, Fleet Commander, Chen replied. Does anyone have specific proposals for how to organize the reparation process? A Zephyrian delegate stood up. The Zephyrian Commonwealth suggests establishing a joint reconstruction fund managed by representatives from both victim and perpetrator species. This would ensure accountability while promoting cooperation. An Altarian representative added, the Altarian Federation proposes including educational exchange programs to prevent future conflicts through improved cultural understanding. Chen made notes on her tablet. Those are excellent suggestions. Dr. Rodriguez, could you coordinate with the various education ministries to develop curriculum standards? 6 hours later, they had established frameworks for war crimes tribunals, economic reconstruction, environmental restoration, and cultural preservation. The session ended with the signing of the Galactic Cooperation Charter, a document based heavily on human international law, but adapted for multi-species cooperation. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Fleet Commander Keithamol approached Captain Chen privately. Captain, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do humans really consider this a peaceful period in your history? Chen thought about the question. Well, we're not currently having any major global wars. Most of our conflicts are relatively small and localized. Our environmental systems are stable. Our population has enough food and resources. So yes, this is quite peaceful by our standards. Kethamol was quiet for a long time. What would humans be like during a violent period? You probably don't want to know, Chen said gently. But the good news is that we've learned to channel those capabilities into more constructive directions. We're much better at building things than destroying them these days. I hope we never find out what humans are like when they are truly angry. So do I, Chen agreed. 3 weeks later, the Endeavour finally received a response to their original distress beacon. A rescue ship from Earth had tracked their signal and arrived to bring them home. Captain Chen submitted her final report to the Galactic Council before departing. The report described their contact with several friendly alien civilizations and noted that the locals seem relatively well behaved compared to some of the territorial disputes we had back in the Sol system. She recommended establishing formal trade agreements and cultural exchange programs with the new Galactic Cooperation Council. Any problems we should know about? Asked Captain Williams of the rescue ship. Chen looked out at the peaceful space station where former enemies were working together on joint research projects. Kethmori engineers were teaching Zephyrian students. Altarian artists were collaborating with human musicians. Dr. Rodriguez had decided to stay behind to help establish a galactic university system. No significant problems, she reported. They're surprisingly reasonable people once you get to know them. Captain Williams reviewed her log entries. It says here that you prevented a galactic war, overthrew a tyrannical empire, and established a democratic federation covering half the galaxy. That's a bit of an exaggeration, Chen said modestly. We just helped them work through some organizational issues. Most of the actual reform work was done by the local populations. And you consider this a routine first contact mission? Chen shrugged. We've had more difficult diplomatic situations. Remember the Mars colony labor disputes? That took 3 years to resolve, and we were all speaking the same language. As the rescue ship prepared to leave for Earth, Captain Chen took one last look at the space station. The Galactic Cooperation Council was already planning their first joint scientific expedition to explore the galactic core. Former Kethmori warships had been converted into research vessels and humanitarian aid ships. It had been, she reflected, a fairly typical exploration mission. They had gotten lost, found some interesting people, made some new friends, and helped solve a few local problems. Just another day of being human in a galaxy that was much less dangerous than the one they had come from.